It's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast, and these are our top stories. Hope amongst the horror. Humanitarian aid will arrive in the besieged city of Mariupol later, as President Zelenskyy says nearly 13,000 Ukrainians were evacuated from across the country on Saturday. New satellite images show the widespread destruction across Mariupol as Russia intensifies shelling in the area. The Ukrainian parliament claims that Russia has installed a new mayor in the city of Melitopol 24 hours after saying the previous one was kidnapped. It comes as President Zelenskyy suggests that Russia is trying to carry out similar changes in occupied Kherson. All this as the net closes on the capital Kyiv. We're with the people desperately trying to escape the Russian attacks. Helping to provide a home. The government will give £350 to UK households that take in Ukrainian refugees. And at 1:45, we'll take another run through the papers with the broadcaster Pete Price and the author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe. Morning all, and we begin this 7 o'clock hour with breaking news. The Ministry of Defence have posted their daily, usual defence intelligence update out of Ukraine this morning. Let's take a quick look at what they are saying. Certainly a focus on what has happened before. Russian forces attempting to envelop Ukrainian forces in the east of the country, the update provides, as they advance from the direction of Kharkiv in the north, Mariupol also, of course, in the south. Those forces advancing from Crimea. The intelligence update tells us they're attempting to circumvent Mykolaiv as they look to drive west towards Odessa. More from Odessa later on in the programme. But as the MOD concludes, Russia is certainly paying a high price as it pushes across the country. The Ukrainian armed forces, in the MOD's assessment, offering staunch resistance. With an overview of the latest developments, Sky's Greg Niall has our first report.
There is little choice for many in Ukraine but to make this journey, fleeing their homes as the shelling continues, in the hope of finding safe haven in a place like Bilorodka. They pack up whatever they can, the lucky ones, to make it through one of the humanitarian corridors, out of the terror of the fighting in towns near the capital, Kyiv.
Yesterday we go with Russian army through the park where there are Russian soldiers which killed people.
And the scale of this exodus is astonishing.
This is the fourth day we have organised such a headquarters here. In 4 days, more than 25,000 people have left, mostly from the Zhytomyr direction. It's Irpin, Bucha, Hostomel. Today we went to Borodyanka, Nimeshevo. We are waiting for the buses with our people from there.
And the Russian bombardment continues to be focused on the population centres, as throughout this war, satellite images continue to tell a chilling story. Fires burning, apartment buildings destroyed. This is Zelenskovo Street in Mariupol, before the shelling and after. Whatever the debate about the effectiveness of the Russian assault, the destruction of sites like this hospital is evident. In the city of Melitopol, where the mayor was detained by Russian forces on Friday, a new mayor has reportedly been installed. The city is under Russian control. President Zelenskyy warned that Russia would try to impose its own choice of leader in occupied territories.
The invaders in the Kherson region are trying to repeat the notorious experience of the formation of pseudo-republics, blackmail local leaders, put pressure on deputies, look for someone to bribe.
The US has announced it's sending another $200 million worth of military equipment.
Russia's invasion threatens not just Ukraine's democracy, it threatens democracy and security across Europe, and by extension, when democracy is threatened anywhere, it threatens us all.
Millions of Ukrainians have already left. These children being treated for cancer, boarding a medical train over the border in Poland. None of them knowing exactly when they'll ever be able to make that journey home again. Greg Milam, Sky News.
Well, let's get the latest now. Nick Martin joining us from Odessa in southern Ukraine, and from the Polish capital, Warsaw, Lisa Holland. Nick, to you first, though. From your social media account, it sounds like you might have had a bit of a troubling night. Air raid sirens going off in Odessa.
Yeah, this morning we woke up to the sound of air raid sirens, Neil, which is a reminder, if ever we needed one, that the threat is ever present here. And these air raid sirens, they go off for about 10 minutes and people have to take their own precautions. Of course, Odessa knows, because it's bracing itself, that an attack is probably not too far away. So these air raid sirens we would expect to become more and more frequent as that day arrives. Elsewhere, of course, there is evidence that the Russian military have their sights set on the west of the country. There was a missile attack in the city of Lviv, which is very close to the Polish border, in the early hours of this morning. Reports suggest that 8 missiles rained down on the Centre for International Peacekeeping, which is particularly worrying because we know that that place has been used by NATO in the past, and it's been used by NATO for training, so a significant target, and would suggest that that's probably the furthest west that the Russian military have gone in the 18 days of this conflict. Kyiv, the capital, is under bombardment. The Russian military is getting closer and closer to the capital. It really is the last chance now for civilians to get out of that city. And as Russian forces get closer and closer, it will become less about missiles, rockets and shells and more about hand-to-hand street combat. That is, of course, what people have been preparing for there. There are pros and cons to that for the Russian military. The Ukrainians will be on their own streets. They'll be able to fight more strategically, but it will get very, very intense there. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says that what Russia are trying to do is partition off Ukraine to make it pseudo-states of Russia. And he said the people of Ukraine will not allow that to happen. We spent some time again in Odessa yesterday following people as they try to prepare themselves. We met some men who'd just joined up in the military part of the Territorial Defence Force. They told us that they were willing to die for their country. But this morning, calm, blue skies, but the air raid sirens remind us that trouble isn't far away.
It certainly isn't. Well, let's bring Lisa Holland in, speaking to us, of course, from Warsaw in Poland. Lisa, as the Russians continue their advance, as the Russians take more territory, the inevitability is more and more Ukrainians will try to leave the country, and one direct route, of course, is over the border into Poland. How much more can the Polish take?
Yes, morning, Neil. It's absolutely the key question, because as sure as night follows day, as Nick was describing there, the more and more cities that come under attack, places which previously people had gone to because they thought it was some kind of sanctuary in the west of the country. And as the fighting intensifies, you're going to get more and more refugees coming over the border. I think the difficulty here in Poland, and certainly when we were in the mayor's office back on Thursday, and they were saying to us, look, we're just about coping and we're close to being overwhelmed, that moment surely will come very, very soon. I am sensing tensions kind of on the ground between local officials, city officials, who are saying, look, everything's been done at a kind of volunteer level. We do need more structure from central government, more organisation to bus people out to other cities, other places around Poland, because the capital here, Warsaw, is creaking at the seams, and also so it would seem the second city, Krakow, is also coming under intense pressure now. I think it's kind of interesting when you hear about people discussing new schemes in the UK for people to take refugees into their homes, when actually a few days ago we were talking to people who'd taken refugees in and the children have already started school. Like, it gives you a sense of just how much is being done here, but all of that just really can't go on and on and on and on when there is absolutely no sign of the fighting on the ground coming to any kind of conclusion anytime soon.
Lisa Holland in Warsaw, thanks very much indeed. Well, we were just discussing it there. Britons who open their homes to Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war are to receive £350 a month from the government as a thank you. Under the new scheme, people will have to provide homes or a spare room for at least 6 months rent-free. Sky's Katie Barnfield reports on one family keen to open their doors.
So this is the room that we're able to offer. Double bed and a single bed on the floor.
Hannah and Matt want their spare room to become a sanctuary.
But ensuite bathroom. So we're thinking that a couple or a couple and a child.
They plan to offer it up for free to a family who have fled the war in Ukraine.
It's a moral obligation, I think, for us all here to be able to do something.
We've got the space to do this. We've got a family, we've got children, but why would we refuse these people that are in desperate need?
They're planning to sign up for the government's new Homes for Ukraine scheme, which will allow people to sponsor refugees to come and stay with them, even those with no family ties to the UK. The government says people offering a room or a whole property rent-free will get £350 a month as a thank you. Those with accommodation will be vetted and Ukrainian applicants will be security checked. And the offer must be for a minimum of 6 months.
It's quite a big commitment, isn't it? 6 months minimum.
It is, but then 6 months kind of isn't a long time either. And we would welcome people to our home for longer than that because we recognise the plight that they've come from.
The government has been criticised for its response to the Ukrainian refugee crisis. But charities say they hope this new scheme will help thousands more.
In just a week, we've seen 7,500 people say that they want to open their homes to welcome refugees. It's still an uncapped programme. That means if we can find a sponsor, a family can come. So if 20,000 sponsors come forward, then that's 20,000 families. That's huge.
A website for the scheme is due to launch tomorrow, so people like Hannah and Matt can offer a safe place for those who have left everything behind. Katie Barnfield, Sky News.
Well, let's return to Russia's military progress in Ukraine. The latest intelligence briefing from the Ministry of Defence suggests that Russian forces are trying to surround the Ukrainians in the east of the country. Are there signs that the tide may be turning in the conflict? Joining us now, Sam Cranny-Evans, research and analyst at the Royal United Services Institute. Sam, great to have you on this morning. I do wonder just how much time you're able to spend on social media these days, given the profusion of armchair generals that appear to have suddenly spawned on there. But what is your assessment? As things stand, is the momentum with the Russians or with the Ukrainians?
I spend a lot of time on social media, unfortunately, because it's quite a quick way to track things. And what is quite useful is that you can get several different sources of maps showing the Russian advances. And I think it's clear that across all available sources, the Russians are moving forwards with their advances. And that, it raises tricky questions because the Ukrainians have provided a very good narrative, which seems to suggest they're winning, which is hopefully the case, but the maps seem to suggest different, that, especially in the south from Crimea and the Donbass, Luhansk regions, the Russians are moving forward quite effectively, and that pace has actually quickened in the last few days.
Does this mean that they've sorted out the logistical problems that brought to a halt that convoy that was advancing on Kyiv?
Possibly. I mean, it's quite hard to say. What I suspect there was more than one issue creating a lot of these problems: a lack of planning, a lack of communication, and things like that leading into it as well. So I think as well there's a difference in the troops. So a lot of those north of Kyiv were from the Eastern Military District, which is typically the lowest readiness and the least capable of the Russian troops, whereas in the south it's a lot of the Southern and Western Military District that are Russia's best. So we'd expect those to advance quicker than those from the Eastern Military District, if that makes sense.
Are the Russians essentially anticipating that they will be occupying Ukraine for the foreseeable future?
I don't think they are. I suspect they came into this with a few different plans. One of them seemed to be an initial rush to try and seize Kyiv and end the war that way. But it seems that as a fallback, they at least are going to encircle the forces in the anti-terrorist operation zone, which is what Ukraine calls the Luhansk, Donetsk regions, and create that, what Putin referred to as demilitarization. So there's a significant portion of the Ukrainian troops are in that pocket in the east. So by defeating them, they potentially give themselves grounds to end the conflict because they can say they've demilitarized Ukraine. So I don't think an occupation is likely or possible, really, for the Russian forces. It would absorb a lot of men, and they have, security concerns elsewhere that they need to attend to.
What, Sam, do you then make of the reports that Vladimir Putin, clearly dissatisfied with the way in which the conflict has gone, has placed under house arrest the head of the FSB, various generals have been moved from their posts? I mean, do these reports have credibility, do you think?
It's really hard to know what's going on in the Kremlin. It's hard to know what assumptions they're making and things like that. And there's a constant game of power and politics at play there. But it is entirely possible that they would have footed the bill, so to speak, for what's happened so far. It is notionally the FSB's assessments that would have guided the initial campaign plan and concept of operations in Ukraine. And it seemed that they were quite rosy in their belief that Ukrainians would acquiesce to Russian presence and things like that. But then at the same time, they are under pressure to report what their superiors want them to report rather than what they see as the truth on the ground. And we can see there are some leaked letters supposedly coming out now indicating that the FSB was aware that these assessments might not be 100% accurate at the time they were submitted. So, yeah, it makes sense that some of them are kind of, in trouble now.
Sam, what is your assessment of exactly how useful, what utility that has come from the assistance that NATO and others have been providing to the Ukrainians? We know that President Biden has made it very, very clear you're not going to get a no-fly zone, you're not going to get boots on the ground. Suspicion that there might be special forces working in and around the area. But in terms of the kit that we have been providing, what effect has that had on the Russian military advance?
Is providing the Ukrainians with a good deal of what we would term tactical lethality. So they are quite capable of destroying Russian tanks and Russian armor, which is useful, but a conflict rests on the totality of the battlefield, right? So everything that's deployed working in unison together. So the Ukrainians have had good successes, but what really matters is their ability to impact the operational picture. And that will really come down to things like their ability to maintain their force levels, maintain effective fighting forces, communication, command and control, and also their ability to resist artillery barrages, because that's what we're going to see a lot more of as the fighting, if the fighting becomes more urban, the Russian predominance in artillery will really start to show and tell itself.
Sam, just a final question. I'm not going to ask you how you think that this all might end, because frankly, we're at such an early stage, perhaps, that it would be impossible to say. But I do wonder how you think the conflict will go over the next couple of days, given what we're seeing in terms of the Russian advance on Kyiv, given what we're seeing in and around Odessa.
I would expect a fairly methodical approach from the Russian forces. They sort of are in it now and have to make the best of the situation. So I'd expect them to proceed more carefully, less judicious use of fires, so artillery fire and missile strikes against targets, greater use of UAVs as well. If the Russians are beginning to organise and bring their capabilities to bear, then this would sort of be the time to do it, and it would begin to mark an inflection point, especially for the Ukrainian forces.
Sam Cranny-Evans, great to have you on the programme this morning. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a quick look at some of the other stories surrounding the crisis now. And Boris Johnson is to hold meetings with leaders of the Nordic and Baltic countries to discuss the crisis in Ukraine. The Prime Minister will host a summit of the Joint Expeditionary Force in London to talk about what more can be done to secure Europe's position against Russia. And Russia has targeted Peppa Pig in retaliation for the economic sanctions that have been imposed following the Ukrainian invasion. A court has ruled that the cartoon character's trademarks can be used by Russian businesses without punishment. Entertainment One, which owns the rights to the popular children's series, had taken legal action against a Russian entrepreneur who had drawn his own version of Peppa Pig. Still to come, we have the sport with Jackie. What have you got for us?
Peppa Pig gets everywhere.
I know, she's great, isn't she?
I'm surprised that she's not at Chelsea. It is.
Couldn't do a worse job.
Well, maybe she is. Big day ahead in the Premier League with Chelsea facing Newcastle United later on. But what fate awaits their owner, Roman Abramovich, soon to be ex-owner? And what will his disqualification as a director mean for the club? We have more next.
Welcome back. Humanitarian aid is set to arrive in the besieged city of Mariupol today. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has already described the complexity of the route into the southeastern city. Joining us now in the programme, Yulia Campbell, who herself has family in Mariupol. Yulia, I'm really glad that you've been able to come and talk to us this morning, and I do appreciate your time, but this must be a really, really difficult time for you. Just tell us, when was the last time you spoke to your family in Mariupol?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Today marks the 11 days that I haven't had any contact with anyone from my family.
So which members of your family are still in the city at the moment?
So my mum is there in Mariupol, my aunt, my uncles, my cousins, my nieces, about 20 members of my family. They're all there. My brother-in-law, and lots of my friends that I used to go to school with, and half of my life is there, so a lot of my friends and family.
We understand, of course, that communications can often be difficult into Ukraine at the moment, particularly cellular communications. At the same time, you must have real fears for their safety right now, given the level of the Russian onslaught. Watching everything that is happening, seeing the videos and the footage, it's difficult to imagine that this is what they're having to live through every single day of their life, 24 hours a day. The shelling does not stop. It is roughly from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening, and then most of the night as well. So people do not get a break during the day to go and seek any food, any water. And also they can't get any rest at night because the shelling is relentless. And it is just absolutely unimaginable how people can live in those conditions for this long without any outside help, without any supplies being delivered, without any food or water or medication entering the city for over 13 days now. Whatever they're eating, whatever they're drinking now is what they had left. It is -7 at night. They have no heating, they have no water, they have no electricity, and they are collecting snow outside for drinking. Well, we hear from President Zelenskyy that the humanitarian corridors will be used later today to try and get aid into the city. At the same time, there's not much of the city that remains, is there? I was just looking at those pictures there of the city. Basically, large swathes of it have now been razed to the ground. Tell me a little bit about Mariupol, the city that it was before the Russians came. It was the most beautiful place. So much effort has been put into restoring it, rebuilding it after the situation in 2014. And it is a beautiful seaside city with so much gorgeous infrastructure. It's a multinational community with lots of universities. It was thriving. It was just at the best point of its existence, I think, before this started. Oh, it looks like we may well have lost Yulia. Yulia, can you hear me? We have huge Greek community. There is at this point, there is about 100 people have been trapped in the Mariupol, and they are Turkish citizens, and they're seeking shelter in one of the mosques in Mariupol. It was a very, very beautiful city, but now it has been completely wiped out. There is really not much left, and watching my school being bombed and the university that I went to, I cannot comprehend that still. Given what you are seeing, and of course, given the lack of contact that you've had with so many members of your family and indeed your friends, I'm wondering what your thoughts are of Vladimir Putin and indeed the Russian people right now?
Oh, I don't know where to begin. There isn't a little glimpse of humanity left. I cannot believe that one person can totally destroy a country and kill civilians at such a large scale, because what he's doing at the moment is wiping away all Ukrainians, whether he wants to have Ukraine without any Ukrainians in it. That's what I'm seeing. As you probably have heard, President Zelenskyy has announced that over 1,300 troops have died since the beginning of the war. However, Mariupol itself has lost nearly 1,500 people. If you think about the numbers, they're all civilians. 1,500 civilians have been killed in the last 14 days. And Mariupol is just fighting its own battle because nobody's helping. The humanitarian corridors are not working. Humanitarian aid is not coming in. There was an attempt, 6th or 7th attempt yesterday, I've lost count, where the humanitarian aid was due to arrive from Zaporizhia. And again, ceasefire has not happened. It has not been abided by the Russian troops, and therefore they are in between Mariupol at the moment. They're on the border of Mariupol, but this time, I think, in a desperate plight to help, they're being accompanied by the members of the church, and there is one member of the church community is in each of the vehicles just to see if that might help. But to be honest, at this stage, I don't believe that anything will stop Putin. He's bombing schools, he's bombing hospitals, he's bombing maternity wards, he's bombing churches. All the churches in Ukraine have now been most of them have been destroyed. And this is where people are seeking shelter, because a lot of the homes have been destroyed. People are living in these conditions in weather, as I said, it's snowing, it's about -7 every day. And there are no windows left. The homes are barely standing. People are cooking outside and they're collecting wood, and they're making fire in order to melt snow and make some kind of wood, whatever they've got left, because nothing is being delivered to the city. The infrastructure, everything critical for the city, the whole infrastructure has been destroyed, and they don't get any break or any help.
Yulia, I'm afraid we have to leave it there, but I genuinely hope that you get words and good news of your friends and family in Mariupol very, very soon. Yulia Campbell, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Now, the Ukrainian sisters Diana and Ivana Yastremska played in the first round of the doubles competition at Indian Wells on Friday after having to escape from the city of Odessa following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In fact, they hid in an underground car park for 2 straight days. Diana joins me now. Thank you so much, Diana, for joining us this morning. You've played fantastically well in Lyon last week. You've just played in Indian Wells. How are you managing to concentrate on tennis when you've had to flee your country and leave your mum and dad behind? How have you done it?
Hi. Well, it's very tough to describe exactly how I try to manage myself inside, and how I'm trying to keep myself in balance between thinking all the time about my family, about the Ukraine, and about I'll be competing at the tournaments. Last week in Lyon, I think the only thing why I really played it good, it's because I was trying to play not just for myself, but also for my country. I tried to show that I'm also fighting for my country, and it's pretty hard. It's very hard, and I never been experienced with that before. And you have to be focused on your matches. You have to be focused on the tournaments, because you need to think about the future. And as my father told me before we were leaving and crossing the border, that you guys have to stay close to each other. You have to support each other. You have to build your future, because you don't know how this war gonna end, and you need to look for your goals. And it was very difficult to cross the border, because you don't know when you're gonna see your parents for the next time. Yeah.
So have you spoken to your parents a lot? Are you in contact with them? Are they okay?
Well, we talk with my parents, yes, but we don't do it too often because sometimes they have to be in the parking, sometimes they have to be the underground, so it's pretty tough to talk to each other. But when we have the opportunity, we try to talk as much as possible.
And are you homeless now, Diana? Do you have somewhere to go? Because I know that you're on the tour, so you're going from country to country, but you can't go home in between. Where will you stay? What is the long-term plan?
Well, that's a good question, but for now, we don't have any exactly place and base where we're going to stay and practice. For now, we're just moving from one tournament to other tournament. And we need to think about a base because I don't know when we're going to be back to Ukraine. And I don't know when everything is going to be finished. But for now, we're going to stay in USA. And then we're going to go for some other tournaments.
Okay.
And yeah, we have to think and plan it.
Yeah, okay. It's a very, very awful situation, and our hearts go out to you. But we had some very nice news from Ukraine in the last couple of days, and I don't know if you personally know Leonid Stanislavski. He is the world's oldest tennis player. He lived in Kharkiv, and he has managed to get out of the flat he's lived in for 60 years. With a suitcase and his tennis racket, and he's got to safety in Poland. Does this sort of sum up the Ukrainian spirit, this never give up, even if you're 98?
Well, yeah, he's very popular in Ukraine, and on March he will be 19 years old. And what I know is that he really wanted to play at the USA at the World Championship in early May, but now I guess it's almost impossible. And about the spirit, I think all the Ukrainians people has a very strong spirit, and for what they make for standing for Ukraine, fighting over there, not just for themselves but for the families, for the civilians, for everybody, for the country. I think that's an amazing spirit that Ukrainians has, and every person is a hero right now there. And I know that he entered the Guinness Book of the Records as the oldest tennis player, and he was in the Second World War, and I guess he was collecting the aircrafts. So I don't know what he has to have in his mind about everything that is going on now, but I
think he's just like you. I think he's just like you. He's devastated, and he can't believe that in 2022 this is happening. That's what he said. Listen, I'm so sorry, we're out of time, but we wish you all the luck in the world, and to your younger sister as well. You're doing a great job. Keep going, keep playing well. And stay safe and keep in contact with your mum and dad. Diana, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stick with us. After the break, we'll take you through the papers once again. Welcome back. Time for a final run through the papers. Today we're joined by the broadcaster Pete Price and the author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe. Good to see you again, guys. Emma, it's your choice first, and it's the story on the front of the Mail on Sunday. The idea that we could be seizing the mansions of the oligarchs to put up refugees. It's an interesting one, this. I mean, 2.5 million refugees, these mega mansions won't cover it, but at the same time, it's a pretty decent statement of intent.
Yeah, so this is Michael Gove, our Levelling Up Secretary, who's had this fab idea to seize the homes of these multi-million-pound oligarchs who have homes, as we know, all over London and the South East, huge, great big mansions. Apparently he's been arguing passionately in Cabinet for this to happen, but many senior Tories and many people in the Treasury and the Foreign Office are saying this is completely legally unworkable. frankly, I think it's silly. I think it's preposterous, because I think we need to be focusing on actually serious and compassionate proposals for helping people come to this country, rather than these sort of pie-in-the-sky ideas about seizing their mansions. Legally, it's not workable, Neil. It's not going to happen.
I mean, part of the problem, of course, is that we don't know who owns the things, given that the government still hasn't moved forward in the promise it made a couple of years ago to stop overseas companies being able to own properties, in places like the British Virgin Islands. Pete, let's go to your story, though. On page 7 of the Sunday Mirror, these poor multimillionaire footballers at Chelsea, they must be really struggling at the moment.
I love this story. It's fantastic. They're giving Chelsea £20,000 limit for away games because of the sanctions on Abramovich. And what I love is they're saying to the players, sorry, guys, it's now budget hotels, budget flights, no more private flights, no more five-star hotels. And what I love about it is this might bring us back to football. Come on, lads. Back to the real world, meet real people and start playing football like the old days.
Pete was about that far away from saying jumpers for goalposts a second ago. So let's move on, Emma, to your story instead. In the Times, this one, and it's glossy magazines are pivoting to war somehow. Explain this one to me.
They're pivoting towards, so this is magazines like Elle and Vogue and Marie Claire in Ukraine. They've been offering their readers tips on giving birth in a war zone, how not to damage your fake nails when you're handling a weapon, eating healthily despite, mass shortages in all the supermarkets. So they're sort of pivoting to war in that they're giving lifestyle and beauty tips to their readers during this time of crisis. I'm not sure whether I think this is completely crazy or actually, fair enough. They need to publish their magazine. They need to reflect what readers are going through.
Yeah, it's interesting because every organisation, every corporate entity is now having to take a position on Ukraine. So why not Marie Claire or Graziana? Pete, let's go to your story again in the Sunday Mirror, page 16 this time. I'm struggling with this one. The Prime Minister rolling back on the ban on big game hunting.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this as well. I'm glad you said that because it is terrible. They say that they put it to one side now because of the Ukraine war. That I understand. But don't dismiss this. But slaughtering of these beautiful animals makes me so angry. And for people to bring trophies back, like lions' heads and zebra skins, is dreadful. So fine, put it to one side, but don't dismiss it. Do not dismiss it. We've got to save the world. And these beautiful animals have done nothing. How these people have these monstrous trophies in their house, I will never, ever understand as long as I live on this earth.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Pete, the government spokesman saying that the government is committed to strengthening animal welfare standards. Well, we'll wait and see. Emma, take us to your story in the Express, and it's, what's it about? The Queen.
Slightly more joyful story on which to end. This is how the UK is planning to mark the Queen's Jubilee, but not only the UK, across the US and Canada too. There are all sorts of... There's going to be obviously our extra bank holiday in the first weekend in June, and then there are going to be street parties. There's going to be miniature trooping of the colours with sort of baby toy soldiers and things like that. And then on an official level, there's going to be the Queen's birthday parade. There's a Jubilee pageant, a platinum Jubilee pageant. Obviously the RAF flypasts and a party at the Palace. So it is something to look forward to. Obviously the Queen hasn't been well, and we've had terrible news for months now, but this is something I think that should hopefully lift the country in the start of June as we come into summer.
Indeed. And Pete, your final story, you can tell I've just seen what it is. Tell us, you're talking about crufts, are you? Or is it just doggies getting pampered? It looks good anyway. It's a good picture story.
It's Crufts is back, which is great because there's millions of dog owners. But we've got some wild and wonderful-looking dogs. These ones with lion's manes. I'd like dogs to start looking like dogs again. Please, let's have proper dogs. And the best part of watching Crufts is when the dogs don't perform. Just look at the owners' faces with the stubborn little dogs. I love this story to lighten Sunday morning.
Thank you both for your contributions to today's edition of When This Were All Fields. Pete, Emma, lovely to have you both on the programme this morning. Great contributions as always. We'll see you very, very soon. But you can stay exactly where you are. After the break, the latest from Ukraine as Russian forces edge ever closer to Kyiv.